The Fey realm of Athel Loren is soaked with magic, perhaps more so than anywhere else in the Warhammer world, save the Great Vortex of Ulthuan and the Polar Chaos Wastes. As a result, the laws of reality hold less sway here than in neighboring lands. Trees take the shape and emotions of men, their primal will guarding the forest from those who would despoil it. Time occasionally flows in odd ways throughout the forest, with years passing in minutes. In some regions, the seasons are fixed, bathing segments of woodland in endless summer or eternal winter. Even the passing of night to day isn't guaranteed, as seen in the eternal gloom of Modryn, the night Glens. The sun never rises in the midnight lands of Modryn. The only naturally occurring lights are the moons and stars, though luminescent spites can be seen darting amongst the treetops. Despite this, Modryn's plants thrive, and its tree spirits are no less active than those of other realms. Indeed, they and their wood elf compatriots are unusually cruel and spiteful, even by the standards of Athel Loren. They practice magic and rituals forbidden in other glades, and they pay homage to the darker members of the elven pantheon. While not as malevolent as the Druchi, they share far more with the Dark Elves of Naggaroth than the High Elves of Ulthuan. Despite their sinister practices, however, the Elves of Modryn are still true servants of Athel Loren, and there is no doubt as to where their loyalties lie when the hordes of Naggaroth descend upon them. Modryn was not always a cruel land of spite and shadow. The Night Glens were bright and cheerful in ages past, but this changed when Queen Ariel was seduced by the power of dark magic. Blinded by grief following the death of her sister Alisara and promises that Dar could rejuvenate severed portions of the world roots, Ariel learned dark magic at the feet of Morathi herself. Even a being as powerful as Isha's mortal representative can't use Dar without consequence, however, and the Wood Elf Queen's spirit became corrupted and cruel. Athel Loren, so deeply intertwined with Ariel's fate, was twisted in kind. The forest descended into madness, exemplifying nature's darker aspects. While Ariel and most of the forest were eventually restored through the heroic sacrifice of the tree man elder Adenhu, a malignant blight remains on Ariel's soul to this day. Modryn is the physical manifestation of this corruption, a midnight section of forest to represent the darkness in their queen's heart. Modryn lies on the western edge of Athel Loren, bordering the Bretonnian dukedom of Quenelles and the wood elven realms of Kavarok, Tausin, and Torkovan. The Glade of Eternal Midnight and a shrine to Drakira, elven goddess of vengeance, lie within its borders, further enhancing its ominous reputation. The fact that it borders the Kingdom of Bretonnia makes it vulnerable to invasion by troublesome or ambitious barons and dukes, but most of its recorded history is no more violent than the rest of Athel Loren's. Considering how bloodstained the broader forest's history is, however, this is no great comfort. When they march to war, the Azrai of Modryn dress in dark green to match their shadowy home. Records of their armies are scant, but what accounts do exist suggest they predominantly field large contingents of Glade Guard. These archers are supported by kin bands of Eternal Guard and the odd unit of War Dancers. Surprisingly, the Nightglens also boast several regiments of Warhawk Riders. These aerial cavalry units are more commonly associated with the eastern portions of Athel Loren, but it's not unheard of for them to dwell elsewhere in the forest. Curiously, there is no mention of forest spirits among their numbers. While this could suggest tension between the elves and dryads of Modryn, it's more likely because the battle from which these records are drawn didn't occur in Athel Loren. If the forest itself were at risk, the Nightglens, Glade Guard, and Warhawk Riders would likely be accompanied by whole briar bands of dryads and wither marches of Dreekin. Currently, Modryn is ruled by Lady Morlanna and Lord Arlas. Lady Morlanna is a blade master, leaping into battle armed with a greatsword. Lord Arlas, in turn, is a mage of some renown. Perhaps surprisingly for a spellslinger of Modryn, he is capable of wielding high magic when the need arises. In 2495 IC, he fought alongside Durthu and Lord Edriel of Kavarok at the Battle of the Cairns. A massive undead host, commanded by the Lichmaster Heinrich Kemmler, attacked Athel Loren, created from the almost inexhaustible remains of the barbarians who had previously assailed the forest. Leading a host of archers and eternal guard, Lord Arlas used his mastery of high magic to embolden the elves in their battle against such terrifying foes. Through the Azrai's determined efforts, the undead were reduced to dust, and the Lichmaster forced to flee once more. During the End Times, the Night Glens saw action at the tail end of the Elven Civil War between Tyrion and Malekith. The Grand Host of Modryn fought alongside Malekith at Alariel's behest, joining the armies of the Phoenix King for the final confrontation on the Isle of the Dead. They heroically battled Tyrion's destroyers, with Lady Morganna cutting a path of red ruin through the elves consumed by the madness of Khaine. While Malekith's army was ultimately victorious, Lady Morganna disappears from the record at this point, and it's likely she fell battling the murder-crazed elves. The host of Modryn survived, however, and retreated back to Athel Loren alongside the rest of elvenkind as Ulthuan sank into the ocean. Unfortunately, the reunification of elvenkind did not bring peace to the warriors of Modryn. Upon their return to Athel Loren, they found their lands assaulted by necromancers dwelling in the mountains, and an endless horde of beastmen. The eagle-eyed warriors of the Nightglens gave good account of themselves, but their losses began to mount as time went on. Ultimately, it was not beastmen or undead that brought Modryn low, but their fellow elves. When Imric of Caledor called for assistance in battle against the beastmen at Karura Karn, Lord Arlas and his warriors were the first to respond. Unfortunately, they were not the only ones. Crone Hellebron and her blood-mad followers answered the call as well, sweeping into the beastmen flank opposite the army of Modryn. The Witch Elves and Hargoneth Executioners managed to cut their way through the beastmen army, but their tide of slaughter didn't stop when they met Modryn's warriors on the other side. Nearly half of the Nightglens army was slain in battle that day, many of them by the bloodlusted Dark Elves. At this point, Lord Arlas and Modryn as a whole ceased to be mentioned in the record. It's likely that their casualties in this battle neutered them beyond repair as a fighting force. Modryn has some representation in Total War Warhammer, though it isn't much. They were a minor faction in the Season of Revelation Wood Elf mini-campaign in Total War Warhammer 1. Led by Lord Arlas, I doubt many people have seen it since 2017. The Nightglens had a minor resurgence during the Wood Elf rework that accompanied the Twisted and the Twilight DLC in Total War Warhammer 2. When completing the quest battle to free Coedel's Drycha, the Shadows of Modryn reinforcement army assists you if you break the easternmost waystone on the battle map. This isn't terribly hard to do, and they bring a bunch of malevolent dryads, an ancient tree man with a lore of life, 2 malevolent tree men, and a decent air force to the battle. Considering you're outnumbered 3 to 1 if you don't get reinforcements in this quest battle, I heartily recommend you do so. While I'm sure this isn't how Lord Arlas and Lady Morganna would prefer Modryn to be represented, I think it works out well enough. The Nightglens are a sinister, dangerous land, and while it's not mentioned in the lore, it makes sense that they'd have an unusually high number of fallen forest spirits. It's a nice bit of logical world building that helps flesh out what amounts to a footnote in the Wood Elf Army book. With that, we've come to the end of our overview of Modryn, the Nightglens. As a group, I like them, but I feel like they're a little underdeveloped. The potential of a Wood Elf faction that even other Wood Elves consider too extreme has a lot of potential, but there wasn't much written about them. I scoured a lot of books for what I found here, but there wasn't a lot that differentiated them from the other Wood Elves. Passing mentions of Lord Arlas and Lady Morganna's exploits are interesting, but they don't really characterize the realm. Also, their deeds could have been performed by any Wood Elf Lord. What kind of unique advantages and disadvantages would they or their armies have from dwelling in eternal midnight? You can do a lot with that. Also, and this is just like the science nerd in me, but what kind of ecological ramifications would occur in a forest without light? Obviously the trees are being kept alive by magic, but I want to know more than that. Does the lack of light have any impact on the plants, even if they can survive? And what about the animals? Instead of giant hawks and eagles like the rest of Athel Loren, do giant owls dwell within the giant trees of the Nightglens? Such details could give Modryn a lot of explicit character that's currently only implied. But even with the old world being back, I doubt we're going to get any of it. But I've ranted enough for today. Until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.